The content in this video is for general educational use. It does not represent political opinions or judgments about any country, culture, or government. Information is based on publicly available sources and may be summarized or simplified. Viewers should verify details through multiple sources.
You know, when you think of the Maldives, you're probably only seeing part of a picture. The real story, it stretches back thousands of years. It's filled with kings, monks, saints, and yeah, even sea demons. So let's dive into this hidden history, shall we? When we hear Maldives, this is what pops into our heads, right? These amazing overwater villas, infinity pools, perfect sunsets. It's the modern idea of paradise.
But what if I told you that paradise is just the top layer? That it's built on a forgotten history that's honestly way more fascinating than any luxury resort. So what secrets are we talking about? What's really buried just underneath the sand?
To get to the truth, we've got to rewind. Way back to a time of myth and legend, to meet the very first people who looked at these scattered little coral islands and decided to call them home.
You know, the first chapter of this story isn't really written down in books. It's more like whispers. We hear about groups like the Devas, who might have come from India over 3,000 years ago. Then there are the Raidens, these mysterious seafarers we only know about from old tales. But the story really starts to come together around one legendary figure, King Coimala. He's the prince who, as the legend goes, was the first to unite all these little islands into an actual kingdom. Okay, so just to give you a quick roadmap of where we're going. We start with those first settlers. Then a powerful Buddhist kingdom rising and just flourishes for centuries until this one single dramatic event in the year 1153 changes absolutely everything. All right, let's talk about that lost civilization. Because long before the Maldives was an Islamic sultanate, it was this vibrant, thriving Buddhist kingdom. And this wasn't just some brief phase. It was an era that defined the culture for over a millennium. And I want you to just let that number sink in for a second. 1,400 years. That is a staggering amount of time. I mean, for perspective, that's longer than the time that's passed since the fall of the Roman Empire. So this wasn't just a chapter in their history, it was the bedrock of their entire identity. And during this massive era, the islands were ruled by this legendary line of kings called the Solar Dynasty. Now get this, according to their tradition, they claimed they were descended directly from the sun itself. So their rule wasn't just about power, it had this divine, almost cosmic authority. They weren't just kings, they were seen as keepers of the natural order. And this visual just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you see the reality today, the ruins of a Buddhist stupa, half buried, worn down by centuries of wind and sand. But on the right, you see what it was, a magnificent structure, intricately carved from coral stone. These stupas, which they called havita, they were everywhere. They were the centers of faith and community on nearly every single inhabited island. Now, this is where things get really interesting, and it kind of flips the script on what you'd expect. The Maldives wasn't some remote, isolated chain of islands at the end of the world. No way. It was a critical hub, a vital crossroads for all the ships sailing the massive trade routes between Africa, Arabia, India, and all the way to China. And being at the center of everything gave them this incredible economic power, and it all came down to this tiny little shell, the cowrie shell. They were harvested by the millions, right from the Maldivian lagoons, and they became one of the world's first global currencies. I mean, they were used to buy and sell goods from West Africa all the way to Imperial China. Think about that. A tiny island kingdom was basically exporting the world's money. So for 1,400 years, this Buddhist kingdom thrived. But in the 12th century, everything changed. And the story of how it changed is one of the world's great conversion legends. It's a tale of a saint and the terrifying sea demon. The story goes like this. The islands were being terrorized by a demon from the sea named Rana Mari, and every single month it demanded a horrible price. A young virgin girl, chosen by a lottery, would be left alone in a seaside temple to be sacrificed.
Well, one day, an Islamic scholar from North Africa, a man named Abu al-Barakat, was visiting, and the daughter of the family he was staying with was chosen. Seeing their heartbreak, he did something incredible. He offered to go in her place, dressing up like the girl and entering that doomed temple himself. But Abu al-Barakat didn't bring a sword or a spear. As the demon rose from the waves, the scholar just started reciting verses from the Quran.
All through the night, his faith was his only weapon. And by morning, the demon was gone, vanquished, sent back into the sea for good.
The king was just blown away. He saw this not as a trick, but as a sign of true power. He declared that the scholar's faith must be the one true faith. And in that one pivotal year, 1153, the king converted to Islam, and then he commanded his entire kingdom to do the same. This single event is the great turning point in all of Maldivian history.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds like a great story, but is it just a myth? Well, here's the thing. We have proof. Not just a legend, but actual history written down on copper. These are the Loa Mafanu, some of the most precious historical artifacts in the Maldives.
So what are Loa Mafanu? Well, they're basically royal decrees etched right onto copper plates. They're official government records from the king, granting land to build new mosques. And they are, without a doubt, the earliest written historical documents from the Maldives. They tell us exactly what happened when one era ended and a new one began.
But the story these copper plates tell, well, it's a lot more complicated and, frankly, more brutal than the legend. This quote here is a direct translation from one of the plates. The conversion, it turns out, wasn't entirely peaceful. It was a decisive and, in some cases, a very violent overthrow of the old religion, with the king enforcing this new faith across all the islands.
So what happens after a change that massive? What became of this brand new nation? Well, the end of the Buddhist era wasn't just an ending. It was the birth of a totally new identity, one that would prove to be unbelievably resilient.
The kingdom was reborn as the Sultanate of the Maldives. And that very same dynasty, now Muslim, would keep ruling for over 800 more years. That made it one of the longest-running Islamic monarchies in the entire world. It survived in one form or another all the way up to 1968. Just incredible.
But here's the fascinating part. That Buddhist past wasn't completely erased. It was just buried. Archaeologists have literally found that the foundations of many of the oldest mosques in the Maldives are built directly on top of the ruins of the Buddhist temples they replaced. History is literally layered there, one on top of the other.
And when you understand that, it just changes how you see the place, right? As one historian beautifully put it, the Maldives stops being just a destination. It becomes a survivor. A kingdom that managed to navigate the rise and fall of massive empires, a complete shift in global faiths, and centuries of unimaginable change, all while floating out there in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
So, the Sultanate was born, forged in this incredible internal transformation. But its brand new identity and its fierce independence were about to face their greatest test yet, this time from the outside. So what happens when heavily armed European invaders show up in this so-called paradise? Well, that's the next chapter in this amazing story.